Hello, this is Dale Matthews. This is Inside News. Mike won't be joining us pretty much for the next 2 weeks. He has some family things to do. But joining me this evening for the first part of our show is Bill Hunker, who got some interesting information from an interesting source about the county budget. Bill?
Good evening, Dale. Glad to see you this evening.
Yes, as well.
Yeah, I attended all the budget meetings, and the last one that was there, they passed by a 5-to-1 vote to have the policy change so that the various elected be within 5% of the average of the comparable counties, and they didn't comparable counties were at all, other than they are counties that are plus or minus 50% of the population of Josephine County. So that gives the parameters, and they can go out and look for counties that fall within that range. And they chose, I think it was 9 counties.
What they did not do is they did not choose counties that are in a similar fiscal situation. They choose them by up to 50% difference in population?
Yeah, plus or minus.
Wow.
Yeah, so they can go either way with that. And so they got a list of counties here. And so what I found is I looked up the counties that they had chosen as their comparables, and I got all of the median income for each of those counties.
All right.
So I don't know it's important to read each one, but I can tell you the average of the 9 counties was $45,468. And so that's the median income averaged out over the 9 counties that they chose as their comparables. Josephine County's median income is $37,447. 17+% difference between the comparable average and Josephine County. So I put this out on Facebook just as a note from the fact that I was at the budget committee and looked at this. And the real issue is that the 5% that they decided we should come within the limits of 5% of the average, there was no justification given for that. That just came up as a suggestion, and somebody evidently said, well, sounds like a good suggestion to me. It seems to me...
Now, I know where that suggestion came from. That came directly from the HR director, J.J. Schofield, because I was at that meeting and we videotaped it and played it back here. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So in putting it out on the on Facebook, I was very pleased. We got 850 hits on reading that, and there was no picture, which, as you know, the Facebook seems to get a lot more hits if there's a picture attached some way. But 850 people were there. A few responded, and one who responded was J.J. Schofield.
Oh,
and
all right.
He ended up saying, well, the reason we have to choose these comparables is because of the ORS with the state.
No.
That they end up saying in the ORS that it has to be by population.
Sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. It says in the ORS what, sir?
It says that you have to do it by population.
No, it doesn't. Does it?
So
it doesn't say that.
I did not read it, and he did not give me the ORS.
Right.
So I have not read that ORS because I haven't found it yet. But I just took his word for it.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Bill, and you can't confirm this because you haven't seen it. That's not true. So I'm stating categorically here, just from me, that J.J. Schofield is telling you and telling other people a falsehood is one way to put it. And that's one reason that if I had been elected, I would have said goodbye to J.J. Schofield right away. What we don't need is we don't need someone telling us falsehoods. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I didn't take exception to the fact of what he chose as his comparables, because that wasn't the point. The point was that if you take any comparables, the fact that Josephine County is as poor a county as it is, we would be down at the bottom anyway. So choose any counties you like. If you choose it by population, all right, that's fine. But when you've chosen those and you get an average for that income, a kind of a moral obligation to say, how do we compare financially with that average? And that's what gives us our 17% below. Had they written something that said the policy is that we will bring our salaries up to at least 17% to the average of our comparable counties, that would have been a fair assessment, because they were actually working with what they knew about the median, the comparables, what they knew about our median income, and ended up reacting to that. Instead, they chose the 5%. And the 5% didn't seem to have any basis to it. I never heard anyone say, well, the reason we want it within 5% is X. So I just threw it out that it needed to be within 17%. The only problem with it being within 17% is that no one would have gotten a raise. And so that the whole committee that recommendation would have been kind of for naught, though maybe in the future it would come into play as a policy.
Remind us, sorry, Bill, remind us again, please, why did you say 17%?
Because if you take the comparables average median income of the 9 that they had, that was $45,468 as their average. Our actual median income is $37,447, thus giving the 17% difference. We're lower by 17% than the 45. So we would have then said, okay, we can be within 17% of that average. That seems to be okay for who we are as a county.
I've been hitting on this for 3 years now, every time there's a meeting of the elected officials compensation committee. And it struck one time and that all the people resigned. And I asked them, why did they resign? And they said they were resigning over the comparable counties. J.J. Schofield said, no, that's not true. And basically that there was no reason why they resigned. Okay, yeah, I think I've got to wash my hair or whatever reason. But he couldn't come up with any reason why they resigned. All of them, all at the same time. Bill, you have seen these answers, including the one said that the state law requires that we compare via population. This is new. No one has said that all the way along. There's people who said, well, that's the way the city, the Grants Pass City does it. There are people who have said, well, that's the way other counties do it. But no one has said that we're required by state law. We are required to do comparables, but nobody until this point has ever said flat out, we're required by population. Did you get that in writing on Facebook?
He did say that it was an ORS on Facebook.
Hearing what's on the phone.
Michelle, we're going to get to you in a minute, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
But he did not give the number of the ORS.
Okay, but he did say, did he not? I think I heard what you said, that it is required by the ORS to compare it via population. Is that right?
That's my understanding. I don't have it in front of me, Dale, this second, but that's the way I remember it.
Would you please, if you will, if you wish to, would you please send to me what he wrote in writing on Facebook, and then I will make a point of asking commissioners, candidates, including you, and J.J. Schofield for proof of this, that he has said in writing on Facebook. I want this guy to be on, he is on the record, but I want to see the writing. If you'll send that to me, I'd really appreciate it, because this is the kind of thing I believe that we need to nip in the bud. What we don't want, in my personal opinion, and this includes me, is saying something that's untrue. So let's find out what the truth is, and we'll see if we can find some verification for the state requires us to do it. Comparable counties, yes. They require us to use population as the comparator. Required, not suggested, not what other people do, but we're required to do that. That's very interesting. I don't think he's ever gone out that far on a limb before.
Yeah, it says, I'm reading his email to Facebook. It says it's actually due to ORS regulations. And then in the next one, He says, in a nutshell, reductions in case law require comparing counties to similar-sized counties.
To similar-sized counties. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I really would appreciate if you could send me that thread. That's what they call it for those who don't know. In Facebook, somebody brings up something and then people respond to it, and it forms a thread of different opinions about it. And here is J.J. Schofield, the HR director, saying that we're required to do this in a certain way. Very interesting. Love to get them in writing, get them on videotape. It doesn't always help because we've had things on tape or in writing before. I never said that, never wrote that. Well, okay, good luck with denying that. This is very interesting, Bill. Any other thing to add, sir?
Nope, that's just it for now. I think that the transparency to the committee, if I was a committee member and I was coming in, I would want as much information, whether or not side, if we want to put it that way, or not. I would want just the information so I could make decisions as a committee member. Okay, here's what I could look at, or I could look at this. And I found that with Arthur O'Hare, I didn't find that. He ended up not using some information that Margaret Goodwin had to bring up. And he says, oh yeah, I saw that. But when he was actually soliciting for what he was doing or telling them how we were behaving, he made it appear as though we were just acting like everyone else. And yet this other glaring thing came up about Jackson County, and he just didn't want. And I thought, why wouldn't you say that members could end up saying, oh, that's interesting, I'll take that into consideration. But they didn't given to them. The thing that was interesting about that last meeting, and I guess there's going to be another meeting. They voted the budget in, but said we'll have another meeting to decide how we may be doing the budget in the future, for whether or not it will be a rollover budget or not.
So we have Dan DeYoung scheduled to speak to be on this show on Wednesday. He has said that he will. We have Lily Morgan scheduled to be on the show on this Friday. She has said that she will do so. And we have you scheduled to be on this show on Wednesday, June 1st. And the show will all be about you. So we'll start with your elementary school teachers. And the name of your pet when you were 3, and mainly we're going to talk about things that need to be done and your priorities, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us, all of us here in the audience, an update about what J.J. Schofield has said. Very interesting. Thank you, and good night to you, sir.
Thank you, Dale. Good to talk to you again.
All right, goodbye. Okay, now joining us is our telephone guest, and this is Michelle Smith. Hello, Michelle.
Hey, Dale. How's it going?
Now, Michelle is in the Illinois Valley, and our connection to the Illinois Valley is up and down. And so we do it not via video, but via telephone. And Michelle is a sharp cookie. She knows what she's talking about, and probably as much as I know about forestry, which we're going to be talking about tonight. And we're going to be going into as it says over my shoulder here, the county budget part 1. And the first person to get up and speak at this last meeting that he just alluded to about the county budget was the county forester. County forester is a rather laconic fellow, and I don't think that we have enough time in an evening to play back what it was that he was saying to the budget committee. But we can play back parts of it and then sort of comment about it. So that is, Michelle's at a slight disadvantage as she cannot see the overheads here that he put up. But I'm going to play this back, and we're going to do the best that we can to make cogent, intelligent, on-the-spot comments that are scintillating. Right, Michelle?
Yeah, we'll try. And I will tell you, I've got a pretty big lag here between what's on the screen and what I'm hearing here on the phone. So
then turn the screen.
Probably approaching 45 second to a minute lag.
Yeah, turn the screen off then, bud, unless you think that's helpful to you. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we always have some kind of lag. It depends on the internet in our area, and we're not Portland, and thank God we're not. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to play back part of this for you. And, well, let's just make sure that at the beginning you just speak up at any time that he's talking. There'll be plenty of spaces in which you can speak, and just verify that you're going to hear this fellow. This is our new county forester.
On our budget, we were budgeted to get revenues from timber sales of approximately $974.
Can you hear that?
Yes, I can hear that.
Good. Okay, here we go. And take a look at these numbers, everybody, because the big question is too much being spent on doing the job in county forestry, and not enough is being brought in to in profits?
Firewood, about $3,500. Grants, $24,000. Cell tower leases, $52,000, and some miscellaneous other revenues for a total of just over $1 million. Pie graph kind of indicates or illustrates where we receive most of our funding from. It's clearly through the sale of timber out on the open market. Materials and services, administration is a large part of our requirements. Big part of that, as you can see down below, is our Oregon Department of Forestry fire protection assessment. That ranges typically between $130,000 and $145,000 year to year. That's kind of dependent on how bad the previous fire year was. So everybody keep their fingers crossed. Easy fire years are less payments to this assessment. That's between that and our county vehicle fleet, that makes up $190,000 of that whole $219,000. I'm also looking at ways to reduce the county fleet. I believe in my short time here that we've got a few too many vehicles over there, and maybe some other equipment that.
This is the first time that anybody in county government that's involved with forestry, including the commissioners, have ever admitted, citizens have been bringing this up for years, that it seems like there's an awful lot of vehicles within the forestry department. And why are there so many of these? So one of the things that came up several years ago when Sandy Casanelli was in office, we went down and took a look at some vehicles, and some of the vehicles, one of the fellows that said about that vehicle that we were looking at, he said, well, one reason we have to replace this is it's got paint chips that have come off of the finish of the vehicle. Really?
Paint chips.
Paint chips.
So are these field vehicles you're talking about, like something I would take out to do a survey or through timber, or are these like on-road vehicles going back and forth to meetings? Or
well, both. This one was one that was in the field. And at that point, well, maybe I wasn't as diplomatic as I could. I said, do you feel there's some danger from flying paint chips? What? So this is a field.
Well, I've driven quite a few field vehicles in my life, and paint chips are really the least of your concern, honestly.
Well, there have been some questions over the years, and to his credit, this fellow Streeter, is looking into whether or not the county forestry department may have a surfeit, maybe a few too many county vehicles that have been assigned to forestry. Okay.
Well, that's good that he's looking into that. I mean, I think that's encouraging.
Good that somebody is, finally. Yes, good.
We don't need to keep around, so I'll be looking to reduce our reliance on that as well. Some other miscellaneous expenses there, but those are the big ones. Personnel services, administration, about just shy of $80,000. Timber, $311,000, and reforestation, $111,000. I recently reduced force of 3 full-time employees. So we're down on the reforestation part of it. And I'll also be going forward, be looking at any other ways that we can save on personnel services as well. The folks that we let go, we're planning on picking up the workload that they were doing through contract services. I think.
Now, that's something I think is very interesting. This is something Mike has mentioned and I've mentioned too. Why is it that, and what it seems to be saying here, according to him, is, let me back up a little bit. Seems to be saying. Why am I saying it seems to be saying? Because the only other person to talk to about this, besides the county forester, and the fellow before was pretty reluctant to talk to anybody else, because, especially members of the audience, especially me, to be honest about it. The only other person to talk to is Simon Hare, and Simon Hare is not going to talk to me about anything. It doesn't, no matter what they may say about transparency, you are not going to get transparency about costs in the forestry department through Simon Hare. This is not happening. So who else are you going to get it from? Cheryl Walker? I don't think so. Simon is the liaison to forestry. And he knows a lot about forestry, but you're not going to get any of this information. You're sure as heck not going to get it from the county, not the treasurer, the head of finance, from the finance department head. Not going to get that. And so how can you find out why it is that we have full-time people up to this time in replanting? I don't think that you can replant every day of the year. Why do we have full-time people, and why aren't we contracting out that service? Any thoughts about that, Michelle?
Oh, well, oftentimes replanting is a seasonal, obviously a seasonal activity, particularly in this area, that region that we live in. I mean, clearly, I think everyone can see why that would be. Why it would be a full-time position, I'm not sure, unless there were other duties that they had unrelated to planting that they then switched over to. I don't know. Working as an independent contractor, a lot of states have done that, where they've had a position, either a county position or state position, and they've gotten rid of the employees and gone to contractors. And sometimes they feel they're getting a better deal monetarily through contractors. Other times for other reasons. It's hard to say. There are a number of reasons you would go as an independent contractor.
Well, it would be nice if we could read some of that writing on the bottom, but even if I blow it up, I can't read it because the way that the IT department puts it.
The other thing about you going with an independent contractor, and because I've worked as an independent contractor myself, is that you are not paid any benefits.
Right. That's the big one. That's the big one.
That's a big one.
That's actually what I was trying to check this slide for, is to see if it explained any of that. It's hard to read part of it because the IT department that is putting out this video is what they're doing is they put some text on top of the text, and so that you can't really read it. That's just one of those things where if people aren't paying any attention to whether or not we're hearing the information that we need to hear.
I've got a question about something that you mentioned a few minutes back, and it goes back to the vehicles again. They have these excess vehicles, and it's great that he's identifying that if they don't need them, of course, why maintain them and keep them? Is there another department that has a need of vehicles that these could be transferred to?
Boy, that's a really good point. I don't know. And this idea of cutting back on resources here or sharing resources among departments, I don't see a whole lot of that being done. Especially here, we've talked a lot on this show, as you know, because you watch it all the time, is sharing resources with public safety.
Sure.
I don't see it, especially during this emergency time. I don't see it being done.
Right. I would think if, you do have a department that is in a state of crisis or emergency, and one of the things, my understanding is they have complained about lack of vehicles. And if you have the forestry department sitting here going, hey, we have these extra vehicles and we're not going to need them. We don't.
Yes.
we don't want them, we don't need them. Hey, why can't you guys take them and use them? I mean, sure, you're not going to have a high performance, police car, but that might not be the kind of vehicle that they necessarily need.
These are four-wheel drive vehicles, right?
I'm sorry, what?
These are four-wheel drive vehicles in many cases.
Oh, right, a field vehicle would be, sure, yeah. So maybe you could get some use out of that, make it a little effective, and share it. Or public works. I mean, who knows?
So let's see a little bit more from this fellow from Streeter from Forestry.
Rather than carrying the personnel to do that work, it'd be cheaper on us to just contract for it when we need the work done.
Good. By the way, I did invite him to come on the show. I've invited him a couple of times. Tell us a little bit about what kind of wood, what kind of timber do we have around here? Just tell us that. Give us an overall thumbnail view of the kind of wood that we have. How much trouble you don't need to talk about the politics of it. How much trouble do we have with beetles? It's going all the way back to the 60s. What are our challenges here? A little bit of politics is the checkerboard pattern of the management of these places. How much of a challenge is it to county forestry to have plots that are not as well maintained as we do? And so if they catch on fire, might ours be in trouble? That's a little political, but it doesn't have to be there. He did talk probably with Simon and decided that he's just not going to be available. As you can see in this budget meeting, he's available to hand-picked members of the budget committee, but not going to be available to anybody from the public. This is a trend that's now happened with this county commission, especially since Simon Hare came in 5 years ago, that little by little, and now it's a complete shutout. The department heads are absolutely insulated from criticism even. And we've had that happen a number of times, especially from Keith Heck saying, I'm not going to allow you to criticize someone. From Cheryl Walker, who says, well, that person's not in the room, even though he was in the room 30 seconds ago, he just left. And so I will not allow you to criticize him in any way. We can't criticize the government. We can't criticize the government. And we can't ask them any questions. And the only person to ask would be Cheryl Walker, Keith Heck, or Simon Hare. What do you think about that, Michelle?
Well, I think that's a bit curious. I certainly would like to see a little more transparency than that. It seems that they feel somewhat afraid or threatened about coming forward, and that, of course, makes you look a little more suspicious in the eyes of the public. I think you'd be better off to be straightforward about that. As far as you trying to get information, or any other member of the public trying to get information, I mean, there certainly must be management plans, timber harvest data records, cruise records, things like that from the field that I would think would be some public record, aren't there?
You have to pay for them. If you want any information out of this administration, you have to pay for it. And it could easily cost you hundreds of dollars every week to get information.
So that is a bit prohibitive to do that, obviously.
Well, it is for me.
Right.
But yeah. And we don't want to forget that the commissioners have now decided that all requests for information has to go through county legal counsel, who's going to check to see whether it's okay to release it, even though that's state law. And the last response that I got from them was that they did not do it within the state law time period, because they have to do it within a certain time period, so it's timely. And then the answer was, well, we're not going to be giving that to you because you don't really want that. You don't really want that.
How do they know what you really want?
It's a good question. They didn't say we're not going to release that because it's secret. They did not say we're not going to release that because of the health laws or some other kind of thing. The answer I got was, we're not going to release that because you, Dale Matthews, don't really want that.
So they think you have some ulterior motive for wanting it, I'm assuming?
That I don't really want it, even though I've officially requested it on paper, according to state law, on an official form. That's Wally Hicks and company. That's the insulation that these commissioners have put up against all public inquiry. So good luck getting it. That's the response that I got.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a very wise course of action for them to pursue.
Well, there's no
doesn't do a lot for public trust, really.
Well, it doesn't do much for public trust, but they're not going to pay any penalty as far as the state's concerned. I mean, because the state looked into one thing, their secret meetings, and were they doing that right? And we had to, divine, okay, it looks like that, and we were right, Sandy Casanelli and myself. But as far as everyday cheating, state's not going to do anything about it. Yes, there are laws, but they're not going to enforce the laws. And so the only chance that we had to enforce the laws was an election, and, well, you've seen, who the people chose. They did not go in the direction of more transparency or more obeying the law. They just didn't go in that direction. They went in the comfort direction. Okay, so, and 20% of the people chose Keith Heck again.
Wow. So, yeah, 20 people did, of course. You could also say, 20 people chose
20%.
Right. So 20%, there's, 80% that didn't.
That's true. So that's good luck. It's just that, unfortunately, there were so many people that were vying for positions. Well, okay, a little bit more from this guy.
Budget summary, total resources a little over $1 million, total requirements about 840,000 with about 216,000 of income.
There you go. There it is. That's the whole deal. So there's the question that Mike has had many times, and I've had as well. Let's pause it there just for a second and take a look at that. Total resources of over $1 million. Total requirements over 800,000, and what it generates from our county resources as far as timber goes is about $200,000.
Okay, so
that's the question.
I'm no economic genius, but that doesn't seem good.
So that means that about 80% of the money that comes in from that is it's being expended, and that about 20% of it ends up coming back to us from all that forestry land. So as I think that Mike would put it, it looks as if these are jobs to keep people employed in county government.
Right. I think most people would certainly like to see a little more than that coming back, and that does make it appear that way.
I agree. That's what it looks like, yeah.
Just back it up a little bit here, because I'm kind of listening and also trying to look at the screen, so there's a bit of a lag. I've got this volume turned off, but I'm kind of looking at overheads and whatnot.
Okay, well, let me pull up that thing again for you just a second.
Budget summary.
Okay, there's the budget summary.
Okay. What you were saying earlier, just a few moments ago, about your inability to be able to approach department heads and have one-on-one discussions and get certain information and things like that. Is there anything that could be done within the county charter, amending it about, the process that you go through, or something to that effect?
State law is very clear. They have 5 working days to answer questions, and you can ask for all kinds of things. This one's going to sound familiar. You can ask to see the emails that are sent back and forth on county computers from people out in among the commissioners, for example. And what kind of communication are they doing? Are they coming up with decisions, as happened in Lane County, between themselves via email? Now, we have a source inside the commissioner's office that has confirmed that they do occasionally meet and decide on what they're going to do. That is absolutely against the law. Something that has now been since said by the state is that you are also not allowed to do that via email. And then a variation on that is they'll send an email off to a secretary who will then pass that opinion on to the next commissioner, and that commissioner will send an email back, and it's just one step removed from sitting down in a room and doing it. The last meeting that I went to on Thursday, they were meeting and talking before the door was opened. It was locked while we were waiting out in the hallway because I could hear them. Right? And they were talking about county business. So as Keith Eck has put it many times, I know we're breaking the law and I don't care. So now then the county charter, all of that centers around what kind of judgment that the off-the-cuff judgment, I don't have any cuffs, off-the-cuff judgment that our county legal counsel would make. Our county legal counsel is the person that said you don't really want that information. He's also the one that told Mike and I in the interviews that the county charter doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't give us any protection at all. The truth is, in my opinion, he's probably right, that there are things that we could say in a court of law, if anyone could afford to do it, that the county charter should give us protection. But if the county legal counsel plus the 3 commissioners are not willing to live up to the charter, they could say, well, the people have made it clear what they want, and so that's what we're going to do. These 3 commissioners and this legal counsel, Wally Hicks, are not interested in that. And if they're not interested, stand up at the podium and protest. I do. People have said, well, yeah, that's argumentative. They're breaking the law. That's argumentative too. They're breaking state law and they've been proven. Well, that's also argumentative. So now what are you going to say? There's no winning in that.
Up against a brick wall at that point.
Yes.
Where do you there?
What do you do? And we've seen instances, and with all 3 commissioners, that they've looked straight at me or straight at the camera, straight at the audience, and lied. Just flat out lied. I don't need to give you 18 examples, but they've just said something that's just totally not true. Now, where do you go when Keith Eck looks straight at the camera and says it, sounding like he's telling the truth? So with the videotape where that's not what was said. Now what do you do?
Right, and if you get no chance to respond back to that, if it's something said in a protected period of time where you as an audience member have no chance to respond back, then there's no way to check that.
And do you think that he knows that? Now, that just happened recently, and at the last Wednesday's meeting, I said, this is what you said, and this is why it's not true. He didn't have any response. Why would he have any response? He already said his thing. It stayed out there for a week. Some people internalize it. There are people who want to believe those things, and they're just going, oh, well, that's definitely, the same thing goes with one of the local newspapers where you get the editor who says this kind of stuff. Oh, look, the editor says that this and this, but the truth is, it's based on nothing. Now what do? It's based on absolutely nothing. I never gave that guy an interview. I never gave him an interview. Well, he said in the interview. What do you mean I said in the interview? I never gave you an interview. Interview this and this and this, and I've got people that are saying, see, he says right here, why, look, he's an editor of a newspaper.
Well,
now what am I supposed to do?
That goes back to people, for whatever reason, believing whatever they see in print is the gospel truth, and simply because it's written down doesn't mean it happened. You need to check sources and references and really ask questions.
Right. So really, when it comes down to it, what can we do about this? What can we possibly do about this?
Well, really, you have the option of trying to elect different commissioners.
We have tried.
See if it works out better. And I would think, really, as far as getting an alternative candidate to what we have now, it's almost like you have to have a county-wide get-together of people who want change, who want an alternative candidate, and to sit down with people, invite potential candidates, and say, let us hear what you're all about, and let's get together, put our heads together to see who is the person here that is the best candidate for what we want, and maybe we could set egos aside, maybe we could set personal aspirations aside, and get that person. Let's all get behind that person, and try to make a change. If you see where I'm going with that.
Oh yeah, we talked about that just last night. Absolutely, and Catherine Austin brought that up. It's something we've talked about before. So then what I mentioned last night is we've got TV stations that come over here and they're looking for someone to make a comment. And they say, well, who is it from SOS, which is an organization? Woo! And they say, well, who is it that can speak for let's tax everybody into prosperity point of view? And they've got somebody. And then they say, well, now everybody else is just loosely organized. Yes, that's what real grassroots means, is that you don't really have a centralized headquarters with people who've been elected as your leaders and they are the spokesman. This is grassroots. Maybe we're a little too deep in the grass, you know. Maybe what we do need is some kind of organization that purports to represent all the grassroots. Is that possible?
Well, or at least you know, a good portion of them, or at least a good portion of them, yes, and see what you can do, because you can't have, you know, 20 people running for a seat and you know, expect to get someone in and get someone out and get a new person in. That's not going to happen.
Well, when you look at the various organizations that are around town, I'll just tell you the ones that I know of, and people who watch this show probably know of many others. There's Brian Pombo has a political discussion group that's pretty lively with people who, you know, can throw it back and forth and have, you know, disagreements and everything, but they do it in a way where you can converse. And then you've got the 912 group, which has a tendency to go more in the direction of Ron Smith kind of thinking about, you know, the influence of international cartels over what's happening here locally. There are plenty of people who believe there's a direct connection between, I don't know, Switzerland and America. Okay, there are people who feel that. Okay, and Grants Pass. There's that's the 912 group. There is the group of people called We're for a Constitutional Government. They don't meet on a constant basis, but they're kind of allied with a number of people from the Constitution Party, and they'll say, hey, if it's not in the Constitution or the Constitution doesn't make it possible, you shouldn't be doing it at all. And that would then end some of the things that we do in our entire society. But they're right that Article 1, Section 8 does not include various things about education and hospitals, and it just doesn't include that. And it says you shall not do anything beyond this. So in that particular case, I must admit, and I've said this before, I must not be a strict constitutionalist, because the idea of the federal government helping out some parts of hospitals and educational institutions, I like some of it and not other parts. But I must not be a strict constitutionalist according to Article 1, Section 8. And probably a lot of our audience is not either.
I was going to say probably a lot of people aren't either, Dale. You know, I wouldn't say that most people would be, actually, if they really looked at it.
Well, you know, if we're going to stand by the Constitution, and I'm talking about myself too, if we're going to stand by the Constitution and say, I've read through the thing, I agree with it, I think it's a solid foundation, then who am I to say, well, you know, I'm going to cherry pick things that I like, and the audience too, you know, are you really going to cherry pick some things that you like and some that you don't, simply because that's now tradition, that's not what we do? I don't like, it's that traditional slippery slope. And then
yeah, exactly. I don't think it was a document that was written to be interpreted based on popular trends at the time.
That's right, and that's what I'm doing. And there may be a couple of people, well, one person in the audience that's also doing that, that's saying, well, you know, and even the fact that I use strict constitutionalists, what's wrong with me? I ought to say constitutionalists, right? And we all ought to adhere to exactly what it says word for word. I guess I don't. No, I don't guess that I don't. I don't. I think I can live on a daily basis, even though there are some things that I'm not doing by exactly what it says. And even using the word exactly. That's not right, Dale. By what it says. Right. There's another group that is, so I see the candidate, Ron Smith, attached to 912 group. And I see the candidate, Joseph Rice, attached to the Oath Keepers group. Okay, so those are at least 4 of the groups in our area that do have iconoclastic views. They're not marching lockstep with business as usual. And it might be helpful if those four groups could somehow get together, put some egos aside. Good luck with that. No, I'm optimistic. And then say, all right, we have another election coming up in 2 years. It is for the position that Simon Hare is in now, regardless of how this one turns out. Let's suppose that it turns out that it's 2 city councilors that are now bringing their way of thinking into county government. And they've not been known, at least recently, for listening to the public or taking into account. They've been known for the opposite. We don't like what the public says, so we're going to ignore that. It is a very worrisome, to me, very worrisome trend that's happening, that they're not listening to us.
Right. Yeah, and that actually is their job.
That's the way when I was on Marshall this morning, he always asks, so once a week, he says, so what's going on in Josephine County that we should be aware of? And I said, well, one of the things I think that we should be cognizant of is the idea that there were a lot of people who voted against. There was a majority that voted against funding for RCC. I'm not saying there's anything terribly wrong with RCC, but I voted against that, and a number of people did. Thing is, that vote was negated by what Jackson County said. Oh, really?
Dale?
Yes, sir.
Dale?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Dale, the connection is getting really bad. I'm trying to listen, and there's a lot of metallic feedback.
Yeah, that's probably just the kind of life that I lead. Sorry about that. And at some point, you cannot hear me longer. You can just up and say,
I think I'm losing you here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, all right. I'm going to say goodbye to you at the moment. And
I had some other stuff to say, but I really cannot hear you. It's you sound. If you ever remember the old Max Headroom videos from back in the '80s, it's kind of like that. So
okay, Michelle. Before I go, I'll try to say it a couple of times before I go. Why don't you make a long blather statement, and you say that you're done, and then you can hang. Okay. Oh, we can understand you very easily. So say a couple of minutes for us, and increasing the volume is not going to help it. Say a couple of minutes for us. Say a couple of minutes for us, and then we'll say goodbye to you.
Okay. Well, I was just, just a couple things about the election. It's a little bit off topic, and like I said, I couldn't understand the last few things. I'm not really sure what you're talking about, but one thing is, one thing like these are these nonpartisan positions for fiercely built party, and unlike to even look at the they didn't feel they were from a certain party. Mm-hmm. And when someone approaches me, I'm unaffiliated. I don't have a political party affiliation, and I was raised in a family that was fiercely unaffiliated. So I would just, in person, not tell me what their political affiliation is. I would like for you to just tell me what you're about, and go from there. And I would be concerned if some of these groups got together. I would hope that they take the party line off and just be able to look at a candidate for who they are, and think about that instead of just going around the party line and making it a black and white thing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I'm really having a bad connection here, Dale. I hate to have to say goodbye to you, but I think I'm going to have to.
Okay. There? Yes, still here, and thank you this evening, Michelle.
Okay, well, you know what? I'll try to, maybe we can get on the show some other time and hopefully have a better connection.
Okay. Good night.
Good night, Dale.
So it's just us now, alone at last. So we're going to be looking at more of the county budget, of course. There's plenty more to look at. And this was kind of the low point, actually, talking about forestry, although we should be concerned about this. And I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic that this new person that came in looked at this and saw right away. We saw this with the parks director, looked at it right away and said, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why are we doing it that way? Shouldn't we be doing it this way? Great. So one of the indications there now with two different departments is that if you bring in somebody new, sound familiar, that maybe they'll look at it through non-jaundiced eyes. Gee, I hope I don't look jaundiced. Through non-jaundiced eyes and say, look, there are some things that we're doing that we've been doing for a while that don't make a lot of sense. It's not exactly the way they're putting it. The parks director came a lot closer to that than this forestry fellow. And maybe there's a smarter way to do this. Yes, that's not the way the electorate voted on this last election. So one of the places where we can be optimistic is that the more new department heads that we have, the more chances that we have that someone's going to, the more chances we have that someone's going to come in, it's going to be worse. But the more like happened with the legal counsel, it wasn't worse. It was just bad in the same way. But the more chances that we have where someone would come in and say, well, wait a minute, there are better ways to do things. Okay, I'll take that every day. And so we can be somewhat optimistic, and depending on how things shake down, I'm not necessarily optimistic about the choices that we have for county commissioner, because the folks that are leading the charge are mostly those who do not really advocate for change in a lot of things. Most of them are more of the same, but we will find out more about that. And one of the questions I'm going to ask them on Wednesday and Friday and Wednesday will be, will you decide to follow the law? Really, really simple. We talked about that last night. Will you at least follow the law? And it's very easily indicated by whether or not you are posting. I know it sounds like it's not very important, but this is easy to, is it there or is it not there? It's easy to see. It's different than, will you be a fiscal conservative? What does that mean? I have my interpretation, so do you. Or will you be open? Will you be transparent? I have my interpretation, so would you. But it's real easy to see whether or not they posted something as they're required to by law. So will you obey the law? My guess is they're going to say, well, of course we will. But then we've got them on tape saying, yes, we will obey the law in this specific thing. It's super easy. One thing is, are you driving within safe limits? Well, what does that mean? That's up to each individual police officer and whether that person had their donut and coffee that morning. It's completely different when you've got a red light. And do you run through the red light or do you stop for the red light? This is one of the red lights on and off questions. Will you post these things as you're required to do so by law? Super simple. Not very sexy, not very exciting, but it's telling. And which of these candidates will say yes now and then completely reverse themselves later, saying, well, maybe we need some more time. Yeah, right. We're going to find out. And so there's an easy indicator, and we'll see what kind of commitment these people make and who lives up to it. You're there with us. Thank you for joining me this evening. I usually say us. Thank you for joining me this evening. And we will have more things about the county budget and other issues coming up this week and try to make it as interesting for you as possible. Thank you very much. Tomorrow night will be more interesting than tonight. Every night will be more interesting. So there you have that to look forward to. Thank you.